for a couple of us at 6:30 a.m. this morning or whatever, whenever we were emailing back and forth. But so that's kind of cool. It's and we got Wisconsin, and so we're like, this organic network is beginning to connect. It's cool.
That's awesome. Really cool.
Hey, Heather.
Hi, Heather.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, that's really cool, Tom. We were amazed even with that, with our first webinar, and we had folks from Canada jumping in, and one from California who happened to be related to me, but I'm still counting it.
Still count.
Yeah.
Location is location, no matter
That's
how
right.
it is.
Yeah, well, and this truly is an international movement and national movement now here. So it's just really exciting to see so many people and so many all around saying, yeah, the Holy Spirit's saying the same thing to us. You know, that's just exciting. You know, you're part of something when you're removed by thousands of miles and the Holy Spirit is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Good things are happening.
Roger, it's interesting you said that. I was just on a call last night with some Filipino pastors, and they're trying to change their paradigm of thinking.
Wow.
So they can plant more churches. And it's exactly, I think, what you're going to present today. But
so cool.
Yeah, it is truly international.
Mm-hmm. Really. Hi, Matt. Good to see you. And Teresa, see your name.
Hi.
Yeah, there you are. Hi. So we'll there might be others who are coming in, but we'll let them come in as they get here. Just I think most of you were here last time, but just real quickly, my name's Roger Bird. I'm the senior leader of a church called The Bridge in Allegan, Michigan. We planted the bridge almost 13 years ago, which is just crazy. But we are now in a spot where we're feeling like we've always been very passionate about discipleship. We've been working with 3DM for the past 8 years or so, which is a missional discipleship movement. And we feel like Fresh Expressions is the next logical step in using the tools that we've gotten, the discipleship tools that we've gotten and learned in order to take those out into the world and use them. And then my co-host is Rachel. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Rachel Reinig. I am one of the planting pastors for the Harbor Churches Network. I have actually known Roger Bird for like a long time because we were in the 3DM training together and launched missional communities kind of together and have worked alongside each other for a long time. And similarly, I have felt like the Fresh Expressions track is just a really great next step to dive deeper into the church planting culture, and is just paired nicely with the things that we already had in place for church planting. And so I'm just really excited to be here with all of you this afternoon to kind of talk about the next steps. And so I think most of you were on the first call last month. And so this is just like the next baby step in the conversation about how we can plant churches, why we plant these kinds of churches, and what to look forward to in the future to plant churches. So we're really excited that you're here today. And if I could, I would love to just open us in a word of prayer before we do more introductions and start this journey together today, okay? So would you join me in a word of prayer? Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for the gift of today. Thank you for the beautiful sunshine and the ability to Zoom together via the internet. We ask that you bless this conversation. May it be fruitful and wholesome. God, we love you so much. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Rachel. So before we get into any material, we just wanted to take a minute and let you all introduce yourselves, but also take in under 60 seconds or less, just explain your context and where you are in this process, whether you're just getting your feet wet, whether you like, yeah, this is old hat and we just want to connect with other people that are doing it. So just go around, and if you're under your 60 seconds, that is a-okay as well. So on my screen, I know John, you're the first one in my list, so I'm gonna start let you go first.
All right, John Byer. I serve at Grace Ann Arbor as a location pastor for Ann Arbor location, and also serve as a catalyst within the classes, the Great Lakes City classes, in multiplication stuff. And I'm keeping my eyes open for, I'm learning a lot about fresh expression, while at the same time keeping my eyes open for that person who has a people or a place that they feel called to launch one, and we're hoping to plant fresh expressions out of Grace at some point when we identify that leader that God's brought and called.
Awesome, great, thanks, John. Luann, how about you?
I'm Luann Smith. I go to the Bridge. Started actually being connected with Roger through a MC, and he brought me back to Jesus, and actually let me into his family and just changed my life. And been listening to him talk about the fresh expressions and been reading on it. I read that brochure you guys gave to us to read, and sounds like a good idea. And Roger's never led me wrong, so I'm doing this.
Make me all choky, Lou. And Luann, who is a wonderful evangelist and pastor, but not crazy about pioneering movements and uncomfortable with it, has agreed to be a part of our core group our core team that's going to plant our dinner church in the fall, because she's got guts. So we're glad that she's going to be a part of that. So John Garbison, how about you?
Yeah, I'm John Garbison. I'm a pastor at Bethany in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And we are really just at an inquiry phase right now. I am definitely not a planting pastor personality, but I'm also really troubled by the fact that our church and most churches are not, as you mentioned last time in the statistics, we have to do something different. And I'm open to wherever God leads us. So.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Dan Byer.
Dan Byer, Gun Lake Community Church, have done similar streams as a couple others with 3DM training, moving into those type of efforts and discipleship movement. We're in Gun Lake area, 20 minutes south of Grand Rapids. We're in the middle of 5 lakes and 7 towns, but our regional vision really is to restore hope to the region. And in order to do that, it's about filling the region rather than having everybody come to your church. So not that we don't want to be attractional, that people would love to come and be a part of us, but it's learning to go to where the people are and be the expression of the church to them. So excited about that and just kind of furthering the journey.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Dan. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, my name's Tom Ellenboss. I'm from Harbor Churches in like west side of Grand Rapids mostly, and I've been the senior pastor here for about, I don't know, maybe 8 years or something like that, and had a few different things I've done back and forth, and been really interested. My interest probably in this movement of things goes back to like emergent church days, when a number of people started asking the question, is what we call on this call and other places the prevailing model, is the prevailing model really the thing that's reaching lost people, or is it just the thing we do and is reaching reached people? And people like, Alan Hirsch and his early books and people like that were really kind of helping me to think outside of the box a little bit that way. I was in campus ministry back then. So I was already a little bit outside of the box, and now I'm kind of inside the box, but still have a heart for some different expressions, and want to see if I can, leverage any of the churches that I work with to help support some creative, innovative ways of helping missionaries to be the gospel and bring the gospel into our neighborhoods a little better than hopefully a lot better than our current churches tend to do that. So.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Greg?
Hey, everybody, good to be with you. I just give this from a personal perspective. After being a pastor in the RCA for 25 years, I was so hungry for God to do something new and fresh. And the last 3 years, I got to see that in an international way. I've seen fresh expressions of church in incredible ways, mostly in the global South, but I've gotten the privilege to work in Russia and Ukraine and see just how God is at work. That just impacted me personally, to be with these church planters, to worship in their churches, to see drug addicts in Krasnoyarsk, Siberia, be discipled, be delivered from their addictions, be discipled, go out, plant churches, know the microcultures of their city, and be able to reach other drug addicts and bring them to the Lord, and experience the new life in Christ. All that has been just mind-blowing. But I've also hungered to see this in the church I love in the US, the RCA, and then to see leaders like you guys pioneering this work just gives me joy. So I'm here to learn, what does it look like in the US context and culture to do fresh expression, and to hear what God is doing through you guys.
Thanks, Greg. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Lindstrom. I am the pastor of Rectify Church in Allegan. We share a building with Roger at the bridge, and also the chaplain at the Allegan County Correction Center. And we are exploring fresh expressions. We purchased a sober living home that we're renovating in December. And we're hoping that Fresh Expressions will literally be an expression and an offshoot of our ministry to those who are coming out of incarceration. And so I'm here to learn more about how we can weave all of this together to save souls and to further the gospel.
So cool. The Rectify is an amazing ministry. It's been really a privilege for us to be connected with you guys. Heather.
Yes, I'm Heather Dode, and I am the lead pastor at Grace in Wyoming, Michigan, and
Cool.
also part of the executive team of the Great Lakes City Classes. And I'm on here because really Greg invited me.
So Greg made you come.
I kind of feel like maybe I should know. We are actually at Grace are under revitalization, and so we're going through that process. And so I'm excited to learn different avenues that we could utilize during our revitalization. So.
Very cool. Matt.
Hey, I'm Matt Rose on the northeast side of Grand Rapids, and we've been here for a couple of years. And like a lot of you have put language to, just our journey has been one of just kind of experiencing some discontent with the way things are. Hopefully a holy discontent, but just saying, Paul says the church is supposed to be the fullness of him who fills everything in every way, and that's not always our experience. So we've been kind of searching for folks like y'all who are on the same journey, and just people to share the journey with. So we're in the process right now of actually closing, winding down, trying to do that well, 100-year-old church on the northeast side here. And we've got a dream, but trying to put some plans to it to launch more of like a micro church, house church kind of network right here. So, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And Teresa.
Hi, I'm I'm Teresa Clairbout. I'm with Bethany with John Garbson. I'm on the outreach committee, and so I get to see some of the people that aren't churched in our church on a regular basis. And I'd like to get more out into the community and be with those people more often. I get frustrated at being in a building. I'd like to be out of the building.
Amen.
And, reaching out.
That's
Thanks so
awesome.
much. Thank you.
That's great. So yeah, we are really glad to be journeying for however much of the journey we're together. We're glad to be on it with you all and moving forward and learning together. So we wanted to provide in these meetings, we want to provide some content. Hang on. But you know, we don't want to overwhelm, so we want to have this be a blend of content and also Q&A and just time to process together. So we're going to do a little bit of teaching here on the front end, and then we'll have time for us to talk together. And what I wanted to just touch on today is what's called the blended ecology of church. Because, well, let me see here. Oh, darn. How am I going to do this? So the blended ecology of church, well, is about working together as different forms of church in order to accomplish the same goal. And just so we're all on the same page, when we talk about fresh expressions of church, being a fresh expression church is about being committed to being the church differently, primarily for the benefit of those who are not yet part of the church. So that's just it. So having said that, fresh expression churches don't look like church as we know it, and yet are still fully church. As we talked about last time, approximately 60% of the U.S. population is just never ever going to come to one of our churches, and so that means we need to start doing some things differently. But having said that, with that 60% never coming, that means that 40% of the population will come, and so the staggering statistic of that 60% can overshadow the fact that that there is still 40% that will come to our Sunday morning gatherings as we're doing them in what we call the prevailing church. I know Tom uses that phrase, and I like that phrase because that's what we have. So with the 60% not coming, that's why most of us are here today, because we recognize that. Matt, you brought that up. That's statistic is just really staggering, and that's what's causing us to have these conversations about trying to innovate new ways of doing church. But when we have those conversations, I get the feeling, and have actually heard from folks in the prevailing church, which I am one of them, and Rachel is as well. That these fresh expression conversations are sort of meant to shame the prevailing church, or somehow meant to suggest that we don't need the prevailing church, and that's not the case at all. And I just want to emphasize that we are not saying we should be doing fresh expressions in place of the prevailing church, or in place of the traditional church, because even as we are kind of processing what fresh expression looks like to us, and we're focusing more currently on dinner church. We have people in our fairly non-traditional traditional church who are really pushing back, saying we don't want to give up that Sunday morning gathering. We want to come together and sing. We want to come together and do communion, and so it's very important to up to 40% of our population. So we're not trying to get rid of the prevailing church. I just want to say that out loud and calm fears of any people who are vocationally involved or emotionally involved in the prevailing church. So because of this, we have both this 60% and this 40%. We don't want an either or, right? We're not either going to do the prevailing church or we're going to do fresh expressions. We want to do both and, because ultimately we want to reach everyone. We want to provide, we want to be, to the Jews, I became a Jew, to the Greeks, I became a Greek. We're going to follow that and say, okay, so we're going to put our efforts into Sunday morning to reach those 40%, but we're also going to start fresh expressions, different ways of being church to reach those people who are just never, ever going to darken our doorstep.
Hey, Roger.
Yeah, Dan.
Hey, just one thought. I think it puts us in a more humble posture too, which is helpful, is that when it comes to the 60%, fresh expressions is about exploring how to reach that 60%. It's not saying we know how to reach the 60%.
Oh, yeah.
It's saying we're learning how to explore this new territory and move in. So it's not like we're going to reach the 60%. You guys only care about the 40%. We're just getting started at learning to explore and figure out how to penetrate a group of people that we just haven't been really responsive to. And so I think it's a beautiful thing. Anyone can be invited on this adventure as well. And it just keeps us in a more humble posture as we're learning how to do that.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Dan. And that is absolutely true. We do not want to, nor are we trying to present ourselves as the consummate experts on any of this. We are all learners in the midst of this and just trying to share what we're doing. And so with those fresh expressions, and Rachel's going to dig in a little bit more into some specifics on what those might look like, but we use the term fresh expressions, but others use micro church, and there's dinner churches and there's house churches, there's all of that. So all of these are just looking for ways to put us in the midst of people who aren't going to come. And with that, the prevailing church and those different forms of church working together to reach more people. And this isn't a new concept. If we look at the book of Acts, we see with the Antioch church, and really ultimately, I kind of have the Jerusalem church up there too, because the Jerusalem church sort of was working with the Antioch church, which was sort of a church plant. And then Antioch sent out planters to plant all of these other churches, Corinth, in the cities of Corinth and Ephesus and Thessalonica and Philippi and Galatia. It's all of those. And I think we can, because there's, books, letters written to them and they're entombed in scripture, we kind of get the sense that, well, we're all these established, mega churches, which is just not the case at all. First of all, Antioch was not a large church. By looking at the size of their meeting spaces, they were not a large church, and yet they fed and served 3,000 widows and orphans in the city of Antioch as a small church, and then as a small congregation, and then sent out these others to places like Ephesus, where they met. If you read the story in Acts, they ended up meeting in a Gentile school, right? They call it the lecture hall of Tyrannus, but it was really a Gentile school where they were meeting. In Philippi, they started off their church plant meeting in a van down by the river, right? They were meeting next to a river until one of the local fashion designers invite them back to do church in their house. So they're meeting as a house church in this fashion designer's house. And then if you really look, there's at Athens, which, by the way, was sort of a failed church plant. It never really took off, at least as far as we can see in scripture. And failure is okay in fresh expressions. That's one of the key, staples, is that it's okay to stretch yourself enough to fail. And if we fail forward and we brush ourselves off, and we can learn from our mistakes. But that church in Athens that was starting when Paul went there, they started off meeting in the marketplace and then actually moved into a government building. The Areopagus was actually a government building. So we see this relationship with the church of Antioch as Paul and Silas and Barnabas and Apollos and Mark and Luke and so many others went back and forth between those church plants back to the church of Antioch. They, when the church in Jerusalem was struggling, they raised funds in those church plants to help the church in Jerusalem and help the people there. So like we see this symbiotic relationship going on even in the early church that I don't think necessarily recognize it as what we're talking about doing. But if we look at the bottom part of this graphic, we see this happening now with the prevailing church who's sending out people and supporting, and these fresh expression churches, and I have listed dinner church and house church and beer church and creative arts church and CrossFit church and hiking church. There can be all kinds of examples of what a fresh expression might be, but it's not in competition. It's in union with and in coordination with. And really this blended ecology of having both of these happening is about releasing the priesthood of believers that is already existing in the prevailing church. I think I might even have this. Oh, here it is. And it's releasing those that priesthood of believers that already exists in the prevailing church in order to plant new expressions of church, right? So we're really fulfilling the Great Commission together, and empowering people to fulfill the Great Commission. And so from what has been happening now internationally, the prevailing church gets the benefit of excitement and energy and evangelism happening in these fresh expressions. And the fresh expression churches get the benefit of structure and support and stability. And I apologize for the alliteration. That wasn't intentional. That's just sort of how it came out. But there is a balance, and in each of them gains something from the other. So there's a quote from Rowan Williams, who's the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Anglican Church has played a large role in the founding of the Fresh Expressions movement. But he says the constant interplay between the steady, faithful, ongoing apostolic life of the church, right? That would be the prevailing church, and the edgy, exploratory new life that we see in some fresh expressions is a vital part of the health and well-being of the Christian church. And so, I mean, as traditional as the Anglican Church is, to see them embracing this idea of both and, I think is a really powerful statement that they are moving ahead in it. And as you talk to established prevailing churches that are engaging in fresh expressions and have launched fresh expression churches, that they're seeing that the nimbleness and the creativity and the energy of the fresh expression churches are reinvigorating the sending church, or the more established church. It's not like I sense, and I know in our conversations as we're talking about doing this, the concern of, well, we're giving up all of this and we're taking away from the already established church. And really, it actually benefits both sides. It can be a life-giving partnership. But I think just in wrapping this up, I want to reemphasize that one of the things, in order for this to really be a symbiotic relationship, we as the prevailing church have to be aware of some of the pitfalls of seeing fresh expression churches as like JV churches, like the junior varsity, or as outreaches or programs or ministry, right there. A fresh expression church is not a program that you're doing. It's not a ministry of your church. It is they are actually fully church, even though they look different than a regular church. They are completely and fully fully church, and it's not an effort to get people to do the fresh expression so that they come to your big church. It is a church in and of themselves, and we can, when we recognize that, we can partner together and we can fulfill the Great Commission together.
Hey, Roger, on that point,
Yeah.
could I just say something for 2
Sure, Greg.
seconds?
Yeah, you bet.
When you mentioned the Antioch church sending Paul and Barnabas, and to me, that is the sign of the point you just made. They gave their 2 best leaders to go out and plant churches. And that was the Antioch church, I think, saying this was called upon us by the Spirit. We read in Acts 13. And we're serious about this. We do need to plant more churches, and we need to give our best leaders to that effort. And I think the Antioch church set the model there by sending their 2 best leaders, to just make your point in another way.
That's great. Yeah, Greg, thanks. That's a great point. Yeah. So Rachel, we're gonna turn it over to Rachel and let her talk about some of the practical applications of fresh expressions.
Yeah, so I woke up really early this morning thinking through everything I wanted to say, and I'm just going to give 5 just really quick points on what makes a Fresh Expressions church a Fresh Expressions church. And so, but in order to do that, I wanted to tell a little story. So last weekend, my husband and I were celebrating our birthdays, and we went downtown, Grand Rapids, Michigan, to a restaurant because they're finally sort of open. And we were driving down the road, and there was this giant semi truck that had the biggest scaffolding I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, what is that? That's enormous. And then I got to thinking, like, what are they building with that big of scaffolding? And then it reminded me of thinking through, like, what places have I seen that have required scaffolding? And I was reading an article about the Sistine Chapel and how Michelangelo needed this massive scaffolding. And every time he'd have to move, the entire thing would have to come down, break apart, and be rebuilt over and over and over again in order for this beautiful image to be made. And I think of that as a Fresh Expression church, where we're building scaffolding, and sometimes we have to relocate and sometimes we have to move. But the main point is, we have to have scaffolding in order for a church to be made. And so this is your scaffolding for today. So do with it what you will. So the first thing is, a church has to be incarnational, number 1. John 1:14 says that Jesus moved into the neighborhood. There is something to that. I have done ministry in a neighborhood that I lived in and flourished. I have done ministry in a neighborhood that I have not lived in, and it's been more difficult. Can be done, but it is definitely more difficult. And I do think that if we're going to follow the Jesus model, it's imperative that we are incarnate with the people that we're doing ministry with. And so incarnational is important. That's number 1. Number 2 is missional. And I think that word is super fun because it's not actually a word in the dictionary. We just made it up because that's what we do. I think that there is this misconception of what missional means, though, because oftentimes we think of being missional and being missionaries means that we go to a place and we do something for someone or do something to someone or to an organization or whatever. But if we really look at the Great Commission to make disciples, we are following Jesus to where he calls us to do things with people, And that is the fresh expression of church, is doing this missional work with people. And I was thinking through, so Harbor Churches has really used Luke chapter 15 as like one of our most influential stories of the prodigal son. And I think of when we're on mission and we're going to places, it can be really scary and it can feel really lonely and isolating. But the truth is, God goes before all things, and he is actually the Father that's actually running toward us. He's running toward us and greeting us with the people that we're seeking, so that we can help people find their way back to God. And I think that that's just a really beautiful image of what a fresh expression is. We're just excitedly running toward our Father to immerse ourselves with the people that he's placed in our lives. And I just think that's really beautiful. This third piece is it has to be formational, but I prefer the word relational. Jesus calls a few disciples right out of the gate to do some work, like he calls the 12. But then there are all these other disciples that he takes his time with. He has to build a relationship before he sends them. So think of like the woman at the well. He has this encounter with her, but he takes his time. He asks her questions. He builds relationship, and then he sends her out. So there are some people that you just know are ready to be sent, but then there are other people who you need to spend time with and build relationship with in an effort to send them. And so formation matters, relationship matters. Number 4, ecclesial. I think we all know that we all have a church that has a set of things that we abide by. There are sets of rules or covenants that we follow. And so that's important as we are considering a fresh expression. What are the things that are must-haves as far as our church, our denomination adheres to? That's important. And then lastly, contextual. There are rural areas. There are urban areas. There are suburban areas. And each context creates a different culture, and a different culture expresses their faith differently. And so we aren't a cookie cutter church. There's not just one way to do this. There are multiple ways. And so I wanted to offer just a few different expressions that I know of what that can look like in the fresh expression world. So I meet with some women church planters that are in the RCA once a month. And Patricia Simmons is one of those women, and she is planting a fresh expression church. It's just a small, more of like a house church model where they do the regular, what we would call normal church things, where they meet, they sing, they have a normal kind of worship service. So there's like the traditional fresh expression that you probably out of the gate think of. And then Savannah Clapper is in Nebraska. She's actually planting a communal church. And so she is a small, intimate, they're all living together. So she kind of called it communal and outside of, so they're doing church, but living all together, but also investing in the people that are outside of their community, which is just really fascinating. And then Roger Bird is launching Dinner Church, and I have been a part of Dinner Church as well. And that's just like, we eat really good food all the time. And I'm super excited about that. And so we gather people that we just love and probably wouldn't ever walk into a church building, and we invite them and share a delicious meal together and don't make Jesus weird, at our dinner table, but we share the gospel in real and tangible and beautiful ways. And then lastly, there is Kelly Alavi, I think you pronounce her name. She was, I just met her last week, actually. She is creating a digital church in Ohio. And so that's like a fully online small setting for her. And she's like, I don't really know what it's going to look like yet. We're in the early stages, but I'm really excited about launching something digitally for all of those people who just can't go or will never step foot into a church building because of X, Y, and Z, right? And so there are plenty more expressions, but because of the time restraints that we have, those are just a few of the ones that I wanted to share with you. And just, I think the main point here is creativity matters. I think God created us to be extremely creative. And we have done church the same way for a really long time. And I think now is just a great, beautiful, perfect opportunity to try delightful things that make us happy. that makes God happy and that is so invitational that people are like, what is that? And so I just encourage you to keep pursuing your dreams, keep pursuing this idea that we can do church differently than what we're doing right now. So.
That's so good, Rachel. That's awesome. So we wanted to have some time for you all to just ask questions and really so we're just going to start there. Just, do you have just practical questions about how do you do this? Like, what are, if you just want to bounce ideas, we want to just give you time to process. So does anybody have anything that they want to talk about that you just can't get answers to?
I'm going to ask a provocative question.
There you go.
Who can do a Fresh Expression church?
Are you asking me, or are you asking the RCA?
We're in a trust relationship here right now.
In my personal and professional opinion, I believe anyone who is a believer in Jesus Christ and has shown leadership in the arenas of faith and competencies that prove they're able can plant a fresh expression of church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you, Rachel. And, I look at the stories in the gospel when, with Nicodemus, who immediately invites Jesus into his home. I mean, even before his conversion, but has this dinner party where he invites all of his friends in to meet the Messiah. And Matthew does the same thing. When Jesus calls Matthew, the first thing he does is throw a party at his house and invite all of his friends. And those are the beginnings of Fresh Expression churches. And so they had no other qualifications other than they love Jesus, right? So I think that's your qualification. If you love Jesus, you can plant a Fresh Expression church. Is that an acceptable answer from Greg?
I don't know what the answer is.
Okay,
I'm just asking the question.
All right. I didn't know if you were fishing for something.
Well, I think some of the reality is we have to step out of the institutional straitjacket. And so if you're going to continue to try to bring all of the institutional things along with it, then that's how we love to kill movements that way. And that's why it's considered something that's alongside and a part of the symbiotic relationship rather than something that is replacing or competing with, but they actually benefit each other. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a beautiful thing. And I also think, just again, the image, when I love, Rachel, when you said with people, because you're right, missionally wise, it's kind of like, hey, let's clean up Martin Day. And then we pat ourselves on the back and say, man, we really served them well. Mm-hmm. But we didn't establish relationships. There was no continuity of relationships. And so I just love the sending out of the 12, sending out of the 72, because Jesus' instructions are so brutally clear in the Gospels there, where it says, hey, when you meet someone who will receive you, stay there, be with them. They will link you to everybody else. And we got to quit thinking of ourselves as the ones who link it. And my experience with realizing that I accidentally started a Fresh Expression church in a restaurant was that the people I formed and forged relationship with are the ones who keep inviting the new people in. It's out of their relationship, and people come because they're there. Right. And that's a beautiful thing. So I love it that often in church, we try to drag the people back to church. Mm-hmm. And they leave all the people they're connected to, rather than realizing God wanted you to plant something there, and that would reach everybody they're connected to. So just some thoughts. Mm-hmm.
Really good, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else?
Can I piggyback off of that?
Yeah, John.
I've been working in the shadows, but I've been listening. So in an attempt to take off the institutional straitjacket, if Fresh Expression Church is church and not junior church, not a program, not a ministry, like what defines a church at that point? I'm not trying to be too academic or I just like, if you have a Bible study at your home, is that a church?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm asking more for clarity, I'm not criticizing in any way, shape or form. I'm trying to wrap my head around how this is a church that exists in and of itself,
Right.
which I
so
love.
I think those are the 5 things that Rachel, I think was touching
Okay.
on. Rachel, do you want to just kind of hit those again real quickly, just for
I think you're
clarification?
probably like, I think maybe your hang up is on number 4, the ecclesial part. And I think that's something that you as either a denomination or as the parent church, which I don't really love that term because a Fresh Expression is their own idea. But so like, or a hub, like if you have a hub that has like come together and said, these are our values and these are the things that we say mark the church. So I do think that like obviously the sacraments matter, right? So baptism and communion are things that eventually you'll get there, and having elders and deacons, eventually you'll get there. There is a mature expression of church that will eventually get there, but we're not having like, hey, in 18 months, this is what this looks like. We're just saying, as it matures, these are the, this is what we're going to get there.
So a dinner church that gets planted is going to have some expressions of a full church, but we're not going to expect it to have all expressions, because we're going to assume it matures and grows into that as the Spirit does the Spirit's work.
Correct.
Right. People and all. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
And so, and just because I know a lot of times, we just don't know what those things look like. So if we think about, because dinner church is kind of where my heart is and where we're heading. So, dinner church, we're eating together in a, it's like more like a Thanksgiving dinner, but it's the way that Jesus celebrated the Last Supper. And so I would say that we are already performing that sacrament every week. There's music, live music happening and art happening. So there's worship going on. There's prayer happening around the table as you develop relationships, and as people are comfortable. There is a very brief Jesus story from the Gospels that's happening. So the word is being preached. So those things are all happening in a vastly different way than we see it on Sunday morning, but still happening, and it still fulfills the requirements of being a church without looking anything like church as we know it.
Okay, good.
I don't know if that's helpful. I'm sorry, was somebody else starting to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say something.
Go
John,
ahead,
yes,
Tom.
I think that's a great question, because in some of the circles I've been in, there've been a lot of questions. This, for me, both is a missions question in church planting around the world, and it's also a question in these kinds of churches. Which part of that's because of the how shall I say this, the largeness of the American kind of expression of church, and because of the dominance of the marks of the church from the Protestant Reformation. Those two things have created kind of an aberration ecclesiologically about what defines the minimum ecclesiology of a church. Sorry to use a bunch of those words, but I've been asking a lot of those questions around minimum ecclesiology, because I don't think that pure preaching of the word, administration of sacraments, and discipline are quite the full expression of what the church is. That's what came out of the Protestant Reformation. Because I would argue that some of our churches, for instance, globally, that are doing incredible evangelism and discipleship work, because of their expressions of evangelism and discipleship, mirror the church that Jesus was calling us to be, much better than some of our churches that say they're real church, but haven't seen a new believer, or someone be discipled in decades, right? So I'm having a lot of questions myself about, gosh, what's the minimum ecclesiology for what we call a prevailing church? Are those even churches, or are they just gatherings of Christians, right?
Yeah.
So you ask a really complicated, I mean, it's an important question as we think about launching these things. And it's a much more complicated ecclesiological question that I think is right now is being debated among a lot of people in terms of our emerging missiology in a post-Christian context. That's a lot of churchy big words, but
I need to get out my dictionary.
Anybody who's interested in that kind of stuff, like I'm working hard on some of those things with a few other people, and would love to have anybody else who wants to swing in that arena. But I would argue too that the sacrament, certainly the word, Jesus as central, some form of worship around them. I would argue that evangelism and discipleship, because they're core to the Great Commission, must be a part of every church expression. So if we have closed church, unless we're in a country in which we have to be careful about persecution or whatever, or there are reasons like an addiction or some one of those kind of things where you have a reason for that. Like, I think having a closed or non-evangelistic or non-missionally focused or non-discipleship oriented churches does not represent the body that Jesus expected us to be, because the church is on mission by definition, right? So anyway, I said way too much. I will be quiet now.
No,
great,
actually,
Tom.
I want to
Thanks.
piggyback off that, Tom, because like the 5 things that I mentioned, I mean, I had 10 minutes. So like, I feel like some of those things that you were saying are like the greater depth of each word, right? So like formational, well, that's discipleship. And what does that look like in a fresh expression? I think each one could have tons more added to it, but yeah, you're right. You're totally right.
So one of the things, take the fivefold. If you've heard of the fivefold giftings, look at those as the fullness of the ministry of Christ. The apostolic goes across boundaries and lays the foundation of the gospel. The prophetic, that is highly covenantal and also speaks of justice and mercy issues, but it's about lining up with God and being covenant relationship with Him and each other. The evangelistic, which has a foot in the expression and to the outside, bringing people into Christ, it's evangelism. You have the shepherd, or pastor, which brings and creates the community of believers. It also brings healing and wholeness to the body and protects the community. Shepherds can be fierce. We got to quit thinking of them as chaplains. And then teachers help bring people to maturity so they can take their place in the mission of Christ and the body of Christ in the role that they're supposed to do. So that's another great way to look at it. It's not the way we've traditionally looked at it at all, but it just gives maybe some different categories as we look forward to.
Yeah, really good, Dan.
I have a layman's question.
Absolutely. That's great.
So would somebody know that they're going to a Christian event? I just think about or does that later come into play? Because I'm thinking about, Roger, remember that neighbor of yours that showed up that time outside? And
we were doing missional community.
He thought this was like this cool, hip event happening where we were just singing songs. And then he's like, wait a minute, is this like a Christian thing?
Yeah, he had several adult beverages and wandered into our missional community. So yeah, he was a little sticker shocked, I think. But in answer to your question, yeah, we do not want that to happen. We want to be very upfront that this is a Christian event. And so what happens at a dinner church, if somebody just wandered in, there will be little signs on each of the tables that says after dinner there will be a brief Jesus story and a prayer if you want to stay around. So people can come, participate in dinner, eat, hang out and talk, and then book it before the message. So it's not like, well, you can't eat dinner until you hear the message. We're not doing that, but everyone will know that this is focused on Jesus. Yeah. So we don't have, what was his name? Tom or that was
Mike or something.
Oh, Mike. Yeah, I think it was Mike. Yeah.
We had something very similar happen at our house. The neighbor lady walked in and she's like, wait, I'm in the wrong place, aren't I? And I'm like, no, but I smell a lot of things coming from your breath right now.
So as our time's getting short, one thing that we're really interested in, because we want this, we want this to continue on. Like we want to continue having just informational type webinars for people who are just trying to explore. We want to expand though, kind of these are just different, going to be different avenues that you can participate in, one or all. The second would be more of a practitioners network of people who are saying, not even, you don't even have to actually be doing it, but you're saying, I think we want to get into this and we'd like to be in a group of people who are doing it so that we can ask questions and get advice along the way. So we want that. And then the third thing is we want to begin to offer, if there's a need and a desire, some actual coaching for people to plug into a coaching cohort where you can get more in-depth time in a smaller group. So with those three things, what we'd like to hear from you, especially for our next webinar, which will be on April 1st, is what kind of content do you want to see covered in this? Because we don't want to just come in and talk about stuff that we feel like talking about. If you have things that you're like, how do I do X, Y, or Z, or we want to hear more about this kind, like we want to hear more about dinner church, or we want to hear more about how to train leaders or things like that. So please, if you have anything off the top of your head, you can tell us now, or you can shoot us an email. In fact, Rachel, you want to put, I'm going to put my email in the chat box if you want to do that as well.
Yep.
Tom, why are you asking me why? Okay, not to me. So this is my email address. Does anybody have any question or any things that they want to hear about just off the top of your head?
Just a question for you, Roger. So is the goal to teach and instruct a group of people who are learning about this, or is the goal to be a collaborative effort for establishing fresh expressions and learning together? Because I think those operate a little differently from each other depending on where people are.
Yeah, so I think the webinar, thanks for that question, Dan. The webinar side of things is going to be the more informational, more just kind of trying to figure out what it is and where I fit in. The practitioners network is going to be more of that shoulder to shoulder, probably still be some content involved in that, but really that's the equipping, engaging, and encouraging type network where we're serving together and we're all doing this together. And that will be more for practitioners or people who think that they're going to be practitioners of it. So that'll be two different lanes. Does that answer your question? All right. So also I know there's a training event on May 17th that Tom or John, do you guys have a quick snippet about what that is in case anybody wants to jump in on that?
Yeah, I can answer that. So when I introduced myself, I just said I was from Harbor Churches. I also work with John and with Greg from the classes side to help provide resourcing and support to church plants and to help catalyze new things there. So John and I are connected to a team now of those catalysts in the Reformed Church in several different classes, and we're trying to work together to help just encourage more expressions of the church. And so on the 17th, May 17th, we're gonna have an event that'll be at South Harbor Church, which is on M6 on the south side of Grand Rapids. It'll be all day, like 9 to 4-ish. And what we want to do there is we want to talk about there's a group called Exponential, and what Exponential has talked about is the 5 levels of churches, which are those that are declining, those that are stagnant, those that are growing, those that are reproducing, and then those that are multiplying. And we want to talk about hey, let's figure out where our church is and how we can move to the next place. And we will have also be talking about the 5 levels of leadership, because leaders lead churches and there are different types of leaders. And so question I have asked myself in the past, how do I move from the level of leader I'm at to become the next level of leader? I want to be better at that. So we're going to take a look at those 2 things. And then we're going to have some break. That'll be like large group kind of stuff with some worship. Then we're going to have some breakouts that are focused on each of those areas. And we will have some specific breakouts that are on fresh expressions. So be getting in a room with some of the same people on this call and some other people to say, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are some best practices? What are you learning? What, and how can we help each other? And where can I get coaching? And what kind of network can I be a part of? Where can I get resources? Is this okay to do? Is it, so we're going to do those kind of things. We really want to encourage any church, no matter what that church is, if they've never thought about church planting or multiplication before, we want to say, well, come in, we want to help you to begin to develop a discipleship process in your church and a leadership development process that can eventually maybe lead you to some multiplication, maybe 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road. So really it's an event that encompasses, I think, all churches, with a laser focus around how do we go and make disciples of all nations by reproducing disciples who become leaders, and leaders who lead churches. So that's kind of the focus of that. It's going to be $25 a person. I think we have some scholarships available for people who either need to stay overnight. We're hoping to pick up half the tab on the hotel room, and then also if we need some help with the $25, we can certainly do that. I can't speak for our team, but I would say that certainly non-vocational people who are interested in fresh expressions will be the first ones to get those kind of grants or those cuts, because often pastors have their own continuing education or budget to work from, and so if it's out of your pocket, we want to certainly support you in that way. John, anything you want to add to that I'm missing?
Oh, I think you said it well. I would just add that, so mark the calendar, and if we'd appreciate you helping connect the dots and connect other people who would benefit from this to come. I think we want to provide a great event, but I think part of the challenge sometimes is trying to get the word out and get the right people there as well. So we hope it will be for anyone who's any leader or anyone who wants to grow as a leader. There should be great benefit and value for them. We don't want it to be seen as just a church multiplication thing, because it's not. It's for anyone in the church, and it's in one level where your church is at, another level where you at personally as a leader, with training that will help you. So
great.
Yeah, and to get connected, if you have Facebook, just make sure you like this event. There's a link for this event. Get liked on there, or let Rachel, or I think they put their emails in the chat, let one of them get your email somehow. And we will certainly make sure that if you're on this email list or on that Facebook page, you will get an invite. We haven't promoted it yet, so we're going to put up an Eventbrite. That'll be up in a week or two. But we'll make sure that you get an invite. So watch your inbox or your Facebook for those things.
If we don't already have your email, as Tom's saying, you can pop your email into the chat box, and we'll get you on the email list for any upcoming events having to do with fresh expressions or that type of thing. And we will also share through there. We have this recorded, and we will upload that to YouTube, and you'll be able to share it or be able to rewatch it if you need to do that. And I think that's all I got. Rachel, anything else that I missed?
I don't think so. I think that's all we had planned
Awesome.
for. Yeah.
Great. So thanks everyone for being here. We appreciate your hearts and your hard work, and we look forward to seeing you all again on April 1st, if not before then. Thanks.
Bye,
Have a
Frank.
good one. Bye-bye. You're muted, Greg, if you're talking to us. There
You heard me, but you didn't hear me. That's amazing. That only the Holy Spirit can do that. So the classes event on the 16th of March, just real quick, explain what happened. A person, Jonathan Fulton from Columbus, is experimenting with Fresh Expressions of Church and their system down there. And he brought up at the exec team, it would be great to have a learning community at our 16th event on Fresh Expressions. And so that's kind of at the last minute we added that, but that's kind of where that comes from. The exec team, myself, all of us are seeing some hope and some some green sprouts, thinking about Fresh Expressions. And so just wanted, very similar to what you did here today. I think you'll be collaborating with Tom and John and Jonathan, but we just really want to have more like a learning community like this, where there's a little presentation, but lots of question and answers as well. This was a perfect format. Great job. It was very interesting, but appreciated all the time you took for questions and other people to contribute as well. But that, I just want to quick explain, that's what is happening at the Classes event. We're trying to move towards learning communities, learning from each other, helping each other.
Yeah, that's great. I think, we had a chance to talk about it, and we're definitely in for that. And we've got, I think the material between last webinar and this one gives us plenty to talk about.
And sometimes I forget I wear a Classes hat, and that question I asked really was truly, I was
giving you a hard time.
I know, we do need to rethink credentialing and training, so that, movements, Dan Byer was right on, movements are stopped by institutional prevailing church structures. And I'm all about that. So that really was a kind-hearted question.
Good.
Not the Gestapo stopping in to.
What credentials do you have to start that
exactly.
church?
All right, guys.
And then there's me who's just like, I just don't care. I just don't care.
All right, good. Thanks, Greg. See you, man.
Yep.
Bye, Greg.
Bye.
Yeah. Nice job.
You did so good. You're a slide. I should make slides. I'm like, oh, shoot. Dang it.
It just provides cover for you.
But
when in doubt, go to your next slide.
That's it. But it looks super professional. I'm going to make slides for the next time. It was really nice. You did a good job. Also, thanks. I just want you to know that I was super proud of myself for holding my tongue, because I was literally like, nope.
You mean with Greg just now?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I am gonna just message him in a nice way. Say, hey, if you're gonna email one of us, email both of us, because this is sort of a team effort. So he needs to know that, and this is 2021.
Yeah, right. Like, get with the program.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's been in our commission pastor team meetings just like once or twice, and literally refuses to look at me. Like, he won't even, like, I've been like, nope.
What is that about?
So weird. And I just
weird. Yeah, that's not cool.
Don't get mad often, but when I do.
Well, if he has those issues, then we'll just kind of leave him in the dust and do our own thing. So
sounds like a good plan. No, I'm super excited about this. And I do think so I was actually having a conversation with Randy Weiner yesterday, not yesterday, 2 days ago, and just throwing out ideas for the northern region, because there's literally nothing up there. Like, nobody's collaborating with them. Like, there's just, nobody's ever invited into this multiplication conversation. And I'm like, why? Why are we not? So I think it'll be interesting if we can get our groundwork laid here, then I can bring it there, in the next year and say, all right, we've already done this. We know how to do it now. Here's a good way to roll out this program, this way of church, not program, this way of church for small communities like that. So I think it'll be good.
That's very cool. It's very exciting.
All right.
Well, so we'll set up a time to get together to talk about.
Should we do that now? So while we're here,
Oh,
do you have, I don't really see.
So let's see. It's the 16th, boy. So it's got to be next week.
Yeah.
Since That's it.
That's it.
So I can, let's see what we got here. So I can either do Tuesday or Thursday, or possibly Friday next week. I can't do Wednesday.
I have quite a bit of availability on Tuesday. I just have a meeting from 12 to 1, but that's it on Tuesday.
Okay. Do you want to do like 10?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, I love it.
Meet with Rachel
Okay.
at 10.
Perfect.
Okay. I'll send a Zoom invite.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
Have a great day.
Awesome. You too. Thanks.
All right, see ya.
Bye.